Beep, 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 beep. Morning. How are we? Or, to my Australian friends, good day. Let's do something from down under. I found a wonderful blog, which was published about a day ago or so, and I put it all the things are in the doobers as usual. Okay, become a warrior teacher, buy me a coffee. End of the month is coming. And come and be a warrior teacher. That's the most important thing. So anyway, I've come across this guy called Phil Dye, D-Y-E, who publishes a Substack called Filtered, spelled P-H-I-L-T-E-R-E-D. Rather good that, I thought. I love a good pun. Anyway, so Phil has written something pertaining to the Australian experience of this and giving what I think is an excellent overview of the situation. So I'm going to go through it with you because I thought you might enjoy it too, and I'll put it in the doobers, and then you can have a read of Phil's Substack and perhaps subscribe to see if there's more that he's going to come out with. And so here's how it goes. The Australian experience is obviously different to the UK one, it's different to the American one, different to the New Zealand one, different to the European one. So you can get perspectives from people from different parts of the world that are fascinating and often inform your own thinking. So I get this all the time because the warrior teachers are from all over the world. You know, Ukraine, Canada, New Zealand, Israel, Hong Kong. It's fantastic. So you get to hear different stories from different people with vastly different cultural understandings and vastly different backgrounds. So let's do a bit of a down under. I'm going to send this to Edie because it's a while since we spoke, but I'll send it to Edie so she can have a look as well. Hope you're well, Edie. So the LGBTIQ. Interesting. The LGBTIQ rainbow flag has been the symbol of sexual diversity since 1978. Interesting. I don't think it has, Phil, but has it in Australia? Maybe. Many, including me, have waved the flag in support of people who fought hard to have their difference recognised and understood. Yet only weeks into 2023, the rainbow flag is under threat. The hashtag LGB without the T is gaining worldwide momentum as the lesbian, gay and bisexual stripes of the rainbow flag question whether the one in, all in philosophy is for them. It seems the T, the transgender community, is at increasing risk of initialism extraction, i.e. let's get rid of it. Go. From the very beginning, this seems that there's a different take on this in Australia, a different way of looking at things, different acronym. So why are LGBT folks suddenly so moved as to question the previously untouchable LGBTIQ plus alliance and risk a splintering of the rainbow flag? Let's look at history. What's interesting from what Phil's saying here is that the original rainbow flag had nothing to do with T&Q. The original rainbow flag was just, about people. That was the whole point. Have a look and see the history of it. You'll see it. Now, what Phil's saying here is people have been cross-dressing and cosmetically gender switching for thousands of years. My grandfather did, as a recreational member of the Sydney Push, an alternate thinking group in post-war Sydney. I didn't even know that existed. Herbert Dye would attend meetings dressed stunningly as a woman. He'd sing and play the piano, often not returning home for days. Sounds like his grandfather was a bit of a player, eh, Phil? He entertained the likes of Clive James and Jermaine Greer. I never saw him in his trans gear, yet my sister did. They tell me he was very beautiful. I'm also told Grandma tolerated it. Just sounds more like a drag queen to me. But, again, it's the Australian experience. His transvestite outings, a very real and accepted part of who he was, were in costume only, a tool to give vent to his feminine psyche. An engineer by trade, there you go, every time. Why is it? Masculinized environments. An engineer by trade, he would revert to his blokey self for the working week and spend time with the Push on weekends. The Push. I didn't even know it existed. It's great, this, isn't it? Yet there's a big difference between what Grandpa did and what's happening today. You ain't bloody kidding, Phil. In his time, there were no puberty blockers for preteens, hormones for teenagers, and the added possibility of surgery to help adolescents affirm their gender desires. He also wasn't celebrated, but an included part of an alternative group when he needed to be. And there's the rub. When the LGBTIQ plus alliance was formed, there were very few points of disagreements between the groups. Is that the Australian experience? Fascinating. Puberty blockers weren't invented, the only drug used were recreational, and acceptance was the mantra. Heck, when social inclusion is at stake, we can diss the small stuff. That small stuff was now become big stuff, as gender transitioning of teenagers with puberty blockers, hormones and double mastectomies become an accepted part of transgender ideology. Indeed, the Royal Children's Hospital in Melbourne has become a world leader in the gender-affirming treatment of kids under 16 with gender dysphoria. This, of course, could change once the first case of clinical negligence are heard against the UK's Tavistock Gender Identity Centre. If the prosecution succeeds, gender-affirming specialists, psychologists and other linked experts will be running for the hills. Goodness, Phil, I do hope so. We can stop these butchers. Puberty blockers or hormone suppressants do exactly what they say, yet there's been no research into their middle-long-term effects when used for gender dysphoria. That's right, none. The only research has been on sheep, and that didn't go well. While the blockers stopped the sheep's puberty, there was a clear negative impact on their brain. Sheep would previously navigate a maze, were downright confused, with their spatial awareness severely impacted. Even when the hormones lost to puberty blockers were replaced, their spatial memory and ability to learn didn't return. I don't know anything about this. This is interesting stuff, Phil, right? Now, I'm unsure about you, but if a doctor suggested I use a drug that has never been tested for its side effects on humans, but had proved disastrous to another mammal, I'd run a mile. It feels like, what's going on? Is this real? I'm questioning some of it. It's great. It's a great piece, Phil. However, as you are reading this, gender clinics in Australia and around the world are prescribing puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones to 9 to 16-year-olds. These kids, like all adolescents, are anxious and prone to negative emotions, resulting in ridiculous decisions. That's what an adolescent is, a maker of ridiculous decisions. I put that last bit in. It's interesting, Phil. It strikes me, and I'm not decrying or being demeaning in any way, but it does. When I read this, as somebody who's been in this scrap for a long time, and I imagine lots of people that would read it as well, from across our various interests, would be like, "Where you been, Phil? Welcome to the party." There's an element of that, but it's interesting because what Phil's writing comes across as really well thought through and heartfelt, and also as if somebody is coming to an awareness. It's a fascinating read. A 2021 study by the Westmead Children's Hospital Gender Clinic, a leading clinic on the east coast of Australia, found that 97% of kids presenting with gender dysphoria had experienced childhood trauma, including sexual abuse. 97%. Including sexual abuse, family violence, or parental mental illness. No wonder the kids want out. In the current gender-affirming model, however, this childhood trauma and family dysfunction goes ignored and untreated, an oversight that could indeed be regarded as a form of child abuse. Well said, Phil. And what we have to remember is, I did a video, didn't I? I think yesterday or something, about conversion. Yeah, Phil, you're right. You're dead right. You're on the button, right? But because that's what this is, the conversion bill will mean that's never looked at. The conversion bill will mean that you just accept the child for who they are, regardless of whatever trauma may have occurred to them in the past. I mean, that's very worrying indeed. So, to continue, I've lost my space. Bear with me. There it is. Right. So he says there's been an oversight that could indeed be regarded as a form of child abuse. Well, armed with this knowledge and the stupefying fact that there is no human brain research on the drugs used by gender clinics, it is no wonder LGB without the T is trending with members of the LGB community. Constituency, I'd say, Phil, but that's just me. LGB groups ride hard for the right to include children in their families, and protection of youth is a strong value. Most LGBT people don't want to be celebrated, just included. I said this again in the video yesterday. Yep, just who we are. We want to be accepted. That's it. We just leave us alone. We just want to get on with our lives. Right, quite right, Phil. We don't want to be celebrated. Most LGBT people don't want to be celebrated. They're just included. Many trans active sites like UK Stonewall Champion Gender Transition, many trans active sites like UK Stonewall Champion Gender transitioning among children with special programs, champions usually do something outstanding. Evidently, this has changed. Australia's -18 site, it's insane that this is reproducing itself on the other side of the world, as we're seeing here. Australia's -18 site runs night celebration events for kids as young as 12, where parents aren't allowed and no parental permission is required. No parental permission is required. This must be an enormous slap in the face for LGB folk who find themselves disagreeably in bed with the transgender community via the Rainbow Alliance. To then see kids medically transition through the gender-affirming puberty blocker approach must be heartbreaking, you bet. It's gay kids they're converting, Phil. A common headline on LGB without the T post is, "You don't get the kids." The message couldn't be clearer. But hold on, doesn't being bisexual, the B letter in LGBTIQ, the same B used in bicycle, indicates that there's only two genders, male and female? Two sexes. In Australia, they use gender, I think, as synonymous with sex. We don't over here. The slow-forming realisation doesn't sit well with trans activists or queer folk who see gender as a continuum. Oh dear! Exclamation mark, says Phil. Oh dear! Phil, you are an Australian and you are capable of understatement. I think that was an American accent. I'm loving this, Phil. Right, okay. So where does this end? I'm sorry to say that it augurs badly for the transgender sector. It was transection originally. Most drugs that aren't tested for mid or long-term side effects have become headlines over the past 60 years. Some may remember the recall of Baycol, Baycol, in 2001, which was found to have caused more than 100,000 deaths due to kidney failure. Again, I wasn't aware of this. Many will also remember thalidomide, which was prescribed to women for nausea during pregnancy. It eventually caused the birth of tens of thousands of babies without arms or legs. If we are to avoid another Baycol or thalidomide in Australia and the world, members of the LGBTI, keeps including the I don't know why, Phil, there's a bit of confusion about that, LGBTI communities, and the rational majority of the TQ communities, there is no rational majority. Right? And Phil, I would say, that Q, the rational majority of the TQ community must make a stand against what is fast becoming a cult of activists influenced medical malpractice. While I'm sure the doctors involved believe in what they do, their Hippocratic oath of first do no harm has seemingly been forgotten. It's a great piece, Phil, and thank you for it. And what's interesting is to get the Australian flavour. There's some, I'm very interested by some of the discontinuities between my particular thoughts on this and others and yours. Now, Phil Dye is a past educator at the School of Medical Sciences at the University of New South Wales. He has written 3 books and currently hosts the Marking the Role podcast for teachers. Okay, I'm going to put it in the Dubras. Follow Phil. I think it's an interesting take, but it's definitely something that I think is worth reading, and it's very good to hear the Australian perspective. So thank you very much for that, Phil. I think there's certainly areas there that you and I think would discuss the nuance of, and possibly reveal a more convoluted and possibly, sadly, Phil, more difficult and dangerous situation than you've got in your article. But thank you for writing it, and I hope that the Jestrites will enjoy a flavour of one part of the Australian experience of this. So thank you for your time. It's been great to talk to you. I've got to get on. I'll see you later. Bye bye.